Welcome to Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs, the podcast that dives deep into the stories of trailblazers who shape our world. Our co-host, Lulu Benavidez, is a seasoned entrepreneur in the beauty industry, is a photographer, artist, and the proud owner of Lulu's The Salon in Galveston, Texas. Our other co-host, Krokonis Hanson, is a visionary in the entrepreneurial world with years of experience in business innovation and development. Together, they bring you insights, inspiration, and the journeys of remarkable individuals who have made their mark. And with that, let's get started. Leslie Cavendish was born in East London and grew up in a large Jewish family in Burnt Oak, North London. He was apprenticed to the iconic 60s hairstylist Vidal Sassoon in 1962, becoming a stylist in his own right 3 years later. He became Paul McCartney's private hairdresser in September 1966 and soon began to cut the hair of other Beatles. His clientele included Jane Asher, Susanna Lee, The Who, Bee Gees, Dave Clark 5, James Taylor, Tony Curtis, and many more. He also attended Beatles recording sessions. Leslie was invited along as a friend and participant to join the band on the Magical Mystery Tour film. In 1967, the Beatles then financed Leslie with his own salon in London's King Road, Chelsea. He was also in the building at 3 Savile Row for that famous rooftop concert, January 1969. Leslie also conducts VIP Beatles tours in London and attends many book festivals and Beatles-related events around the UK, Europe, and the USA. He also partakes in lectures at conventions, universities, TV, and radio about fashion, music, and 60s culture. He has 2 sons and divides his time between London and Spain.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs. I am your co-host, Lulu Benavidez, and I couldn't be more excited to be with you today. This podcast is all about celebrating creativity and exploring the journey of incredible individuals. Whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, or just someone that's looking for an inspiration, you're in the right place. But before we get started on our conversation, I'd like to take a moment to ask for your support on our podcast. As you know, Sue and I just started just a couple of months and we're growing with fabulous guests that we have been interviewing and we're going to interview in 2025. So it means a lot for your support. So whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or whatever your favorite platform is, please leave us a review and follow us. Or if you'd like to see our faces and of course our interview, they sent us all the photographs you're able to see. Go to YouTube at Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs, and please look at the episode. Let me ask you a little favor is to please leave us a review because our podcast will grow if you really like us. And now let me introduce you to someone that makes this podcast even better. My amazing co-host, Sue Krokonis Hanson. She brings her energy, her wit, and her insights to every episode. And I'm so lucky to have her on my side. Sue?
Thank you, Lulu. And as you and I have discussed many times, what really makes the show is the type of unique guests that we bring on. And we say artists, icons, and entrepreneurs. Many times our guests fit all 3 categories. But today we have a fabulous interview to do with Leslie Cavendish, who is Vidal Sassoon from London, but is best known for being a celebrity hairstylist for the Beatles. So we are so excited, not just to hear the stories about the Beatles, but to hear from Leslie from the inside out, this incredible journey that he was on, and I like to say, all the backstage stuff. So Leslie, we welcome you. We've been just looking forward to just getting to know you and chatting with you. And of course, we have 5,000 questions. We might not get them all done in this interview, but we'll start by pulling back the curtain and introducing you to our audience. Welcome, Leslie Cavendish.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Lulu, for the invitation. And I'll probably be able to do 4,500. We'll leave the 500 for another show.
So tell us, Leslie, about how you were trained. Let's start in the beginning. You were trained with Vidal Sassoon in the beginning. So why don't you tell us your journey there?
Well, my journey there was was a zigzag journey because I never wanted to be a hairdresser. I wanted to be a footballer or soccer.
Oh, wow.
One of my best friends in London, still is my best friend, a gentleman called Lawrence Falk. He, we went to the same school. He actually started the first unisex hairdressing salon in Great Britain called Crimpers. But he left school and he went to work for a hairdressing salon in Baker Street called Erica Baker Street. I wondered why, because Lawrence was a fantastic footballer, and it didn't take me long to realise that he liked hanging around with a lot of women and seeing the women come in the shop, and he thought it would be a good idea if he could style hair. He suggested that to me, and I thought, well, that doesn't sound like a bad idea, to go to work and, shop full of ladies that come in. I saw it with my mother when I went to pick my mum up. In North London where I lived. I walked into the salon, there was one guy and they had 3 hairstylists here, and he was the only man in there, and I was just sitting there waiting for my mum to come out, and I thought, no wonder Lawrence decided he wants to be a hairdresser. Completely different, chalk and cheese. I used to work with Mark a lot. And people, there's hairdressers, there's a stylist, and there's hair cutters. And Mark, particularly, he used to do Dusty Springfield's hair, the hair, backcombed hair, and he used to do Lulu's hair, these are sort of big names in the music business. And he would backcomb it and he would wash it, and he was not the greatest cutter, but he used to shape hair, which was brilliant. And he used to be able to put hair up in a chignon, and he used to be able to put false pieces on, and this and that. Whereas Roger would just cut hair, okay? And he was precise. He was so slow, Roger. I mean, after 3 months working with him, he asked me to stay on longer. So I stayed with Roger for about 9 months and made I used to make sure his clients had treatments and things, and had to apologize for the 8:30 client would suddenly, the 9:30 client would be the 10 o'clock client. And all during the whole course of this day, he would be running behind. Eventually, it turned out that he did me the biggest favour in the world by doing that. I was so glad that Roger was so slow, because it led me to actually get in to do the Beatles' hair. Through his client, Jane Asher.
Wow.
One of the questions I'd like to ask you, Leslie, and I'll preface this by saying that I asked it of Christopher, I asked it of Tony, I've asked it of Leon. So, everything we do, we take a part of that with us. What do you think is the best thing you learned or gained from the time you spent at Vidal Sassoon?
The first thing I learned was, and we were told, respect. The person that you're in the mirror is your client. Respect. You can joke, you can have fun. Always remember she's a client. That was very important. Show respect. And discipline. In hairdressing, you can't sort of muck about with things. There was a guy there. When you cut, when Sassoon's haircuts, you had to go on model night and watch the stylists doing these 5-point cuts, or one down this side and the fringe and everything there, the Nancy Kwan look and things. You couldn't afford to make a slip up by your ears. I remember being upstairs with a guy called Stephen, not Stephen Way, another guy called Stephen, a really nice guy. And he was very nervous when he cut hair. And I can remember him cutting the hair, and he cut this woman's lobe off. Now, if you pinch your lobe, you can't feel it. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
You squeeze it, you can't feel it. And I'm holding the hair there, and he slipped, and the blood was pouring down. And I'm thinking, oh my. So I had to do this, and you had to tell the client afterwards what he did. She went to put her earring in. It's just weird. And, so you had to concentrate. And I learned that. And I also learned as well that you could be yourself. You don't have to be a robot, as I say, as long as you respect the person there, you can do what Ricky Burns did, have a laugh and a giggle with somebody. Also, Vidal often taught us, don't forget that you're a client. You basically don't start dating your clients. I'm not quite sure he followed his own rules, but there's a time and there's a time. There was a hairdresser there called Warren Tufnell. Never forget, I helped Warren. Good-looking guy, very, very smart. And then the client would come in and he would know the clients. So I just sort of started, the very pretty ones. He said, Leslie, go to round the corner. There's a florist in Brook Street called Constance Spry. And there happened to be the Royal Florist. I said, why should I go there? He said, go down and get a rose and just put it on my account. So I leave the salon, go around the corner, go to Constance Spry. I said, could I have a rose, please? And could you put it on Mr. Warren's account? So I walked in with a rose. I had to put it in a vase. And there was a private room downstairs at Bond Street. And the client would be in there with the rose. And Warren was brilliant. Unfortunately, the time I finished with him, and the time that maybe 6 months later, he didn't have any clients left. There comes a time where you've got to sort of behave yourself. So I learned that as well. There are lots of funny things that went on. One of the guys, I don't know if Tony mentioned it, there was a lovely guy there called Alan McEwen. Now, Alan and I started about the same time. He eventually left hairdressing and married Tracy Ullman. Okay. And he took her to America and they had the Tracy Ullman show. But we used to have a good laugh, and this is how you get your personality would come out. So you used to banter. I still love bantering, but with Alan. Actually, I never wanted to be a hairdresser. I never thought the idea of being a hairdresser was what I was going to do. I wanted to be a footballer. But my best friend called Lawrence Falk, he started the first hairdressing salon, unisex salon called Crimpers. I know your good friend Tony Beckerman would know that. I wondered why, and it didn't take me long after a conversation with him that he thought going to work every morning, styling ladies' hair and being surrounded by ladies, it was all, Lawrence loved all that. I thought, well, I'm going to follow him. It'd be a good idea. He said to me that there's a guy, I wanted to go and work at his shop where he was working, called Eric at Baker Street. No, he said, don't do that. He said, there's a guy called Vidal Sassoon that Eric goes to twice a week, copies the new style, then comes back. He said, why don't you go there? So I made an appointment to see them. I told my aunt, I said, I'm going to go and see Vidal Sassoon, a strange name. She said, oh, I know him. We went to the same clubs together in East London. When you see him, say hello. Okay, yeah, I'm bound to do that. I make this appointment, and I walked down Bond Street. I never forget the first time. Got out of Bond Street station, and to be honest with you, the diamonds and the gold, coming out the windows from Asprey's, Cartier, this was all new to me. Especially where the area I was brought up in, and I go to Sassoon expecting music, and there's this great big glass front window with lilies in the window and on the reception. And I sat in the reception. There was this buzz, not of music, but of chatter, and people just running around. There was, I thought, oh my God, I'm watching people style here. And there was rollers, and there was a mezzanine with like space helmet dryers. I saw ladies with their feet in the buckets and hands in the buckets. I had no idea that there was a pedicure or manicure. And I come in, and there, Mr. Gordon, who was the manager, came up, and they said, he said, oh, please come through. You've got an interview here. I go downstairs to the office. Now, I didn't know that I took a wooden bowl that I made at school. It was a crooked wooden bowl that I was very proud of, where we had fruit in. And I was hopeless at painting. Art wasn't even in my head. And I thought the only thing I ever made was a wooden bowl. So I put it in a plastic bag. And when I was walking through the salon in a little plastic bag with this wooden bowl, and Mr. Gordon, everybody was Mr., sat down in the office. He said, now, what makes you think that you could be a hairdresser? What can you add to Sassoon's hair? And with that, I just sort of put the wooden bowl on the table, and I said, Mr. Lawrence, the way I've shaped this wooden bowl is the way I'm going to shape women's hair. And he looked at me like I was nuts. And I looked at him, I thought, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I did. No, he said, okay. There was a little smile on his face. Then we had a little talk. He said, okay, I'll get back to you. And then I left the salon again, looking around thinking, I can't even hold a comb or scissors. How am I going to do these things? But anyway, waited 2 weeks, never heard, thought that was it. And I get a phone call from Sassoon's. Would you like to come in for, like to start work? I was 15 years old at the time. And
Wow.
We've accepted you. So go there and saw Mr. Lawrence. And he said to me, Leslie, when we told Mr. Sassoon and the other guys here that you walked in with a wooden bowl and thought that shape hair, we thought, you know, you had so much chutzpah to do that you employed. So that was my day. That was how I got in there. It was interesting, you know, because there were people there. As I said, there was no music. There was this sort of chatter, and there were people there early in the morning that they walked out an hour and a half, 2 hours later, and they were famous. You know, there'd be people like Mia Farrow there, and Joan Collins and Shirley Bassey, and all these people that you see, but you don't see them with wet hair, with no makeup in the morning. And you know, it was exciting. You know, you started off as a junior, and you sort of did 3 months with one, and then you went round, and then you went into trichology department, then you went into the tinting department, tried to absorb everything there. And it was great fun, and the personalities there. I mean, you know, the day I started, you know, I didn't know. I worked for a guy called Ricky Bones. I don't know if you've heard of Ricky, but he's one of the funniest men I've ever met. And he was a comedian, born comedian. And he would, you know, do hair, and people would walk in with a Vogue magazine and say, Ricky, I would like my hair like this. And he actually said to them, Madam, I'm a hairdresser, not a magician. You know, and I look at him thinking, oh my God, how did he get away with that? And they would laugh, you know. And then another thing he would say, Madam, this is a comb, not a wand. You know, leave it to me. And it was just so funny. And the humour of this particular guy, I loved it. I loved it. Then I'll go on to someone serious. Roger Thompson, serious. We had two ladies come in. One was blonde and one was had dark hair. And we took them, the stylist said, you know, take them to the backwash, wash there. Well, I'm talking at 8 o'clock in the morning, okay? This was an early call. And I'm washing this lady's hair and blah, 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 nothing's happened. And go back to the stylist. And while they're doing their hair, she's doing this makeup. She's really made up to the hilt there. Makeup, mascara, lipstick, everything, looking beautiful, you know. Slightly sort of open top there, okay. At the same time, there's another guy, this woman with black hair, doing the same thing. We finished, and the stylist said, would you take the client to the reception, please? And we left at the same time as this other client. When I get to the reception, there's a black Rolls Royce outside with a chauffeur, opened the door and brought them in. They sat down in the car. Now we're talking about 9:15, they finished. I didn't realise the following day that they were going to the Old Bailey, because their name was the Christine Keeler affair, where Christine Keeler was having an affair with the Russian attaché while having an affair with the British defence minister at the same time. And it was known as the perfumer affair. And you know, things like that, it was just really funny. So they were the good days. We had a good times, good laugh.
Which takes me to this next question is, how did you get started on doing celebrity hair?
Well, it started actually with Roger. I learned a lot from Roger, except that I always wanted to be like Mark. Not quite, because Mark used to churn them out. Literally, he could do 3 an hour, 3, 4 an hour. I mean, he really could. Roger could do one every hour and a half, you know. One of the clients he had in was Jane Asher. Now, getting back to what Sassoon always taught us, remember they were a client. Obviously, you knew that she was going out with Paul McCartney. So you're not going to say to her, oh, by the way, how's Paul or how the Beatles? You don't say anything. She's actually a serious Shakespearean actress. So she would talk about, she's doing films. So when I used to wash her hair, I used to take her, she had very long strawberry blonde hair, really thick hair. I used to go to the backwash, wash her hair, and then say to Roger, I finished. He'd say, could you start blow drying it? So I started to learn blow drying it, starting from the very bottom and working my way through to the top and turning under or turning over, whatever the style was. That would take me about 40 minutes, 35 minutes. Roger's still doing his client. And then I'll say, Mr. Roger, I finished now. And he'd quickly just say to the client, excuse me 1 minute. He'll come over. Hello, Jane, blah, blah, blah. Just touch her hair, do this. Leslie's back mirror. She'd say, thank you, Roger. He's the boss. It's fair enough. When I became a stylist, she came down. And we used to someone used to come in just for a comb out. I don't know if they still use that term now. Where you didn't make an appointment, but they just wanted a quick blow dry, which was fine. I sort of started I was doing a lot of the models. There's a place down Bond Street called Lucy Clayton, which was like a modelling finishing school for debutantes. So a lot of my clientele was that. Although they were very pretty, they used to get a 50% discount. Right, so you used to work and not really make any money, but that's how you started. And Jane came down one morning, beg your pardon, and Roger couldn't do her hair. So the receptionist said, Leslie, Roger's a bit busy at the moment. Oh, really? What, is behind, is he? Could you just do Jane's hair? And the first time, that was fine. I knew instead of me washing her hair now, someone else washed it, and I did that. And when I showed her the back mirror, she said, thank you, Leslie. So, things have moved on. That was fine. Second time she came down, again, Roger couldn't do it. Now I'm thinking to myself, Roger, you're a bit stupid here. She's a really good client. Just make time to if you're going to keep anyone waiting, don't keep her waiting, just don't do it. 3 times he did it. And on the third occasion, the receptionist came down and said, Leslie, Jane's in again. She's really upset with Roger. Again, he can't do it. Will you do it? And I said, yeah, it was a Saturday morning. And we used to work half day. The last client was 11:30, 12 o'clock, if I remember. And I said, yes, of course I do it. And the same thing, got someone to wash it. I started hand drying it. And then I finally finished it. And then she just said to me, completely out of the blue, what are you doing this afternoon? And I said, oh, blimey, And then I went, oh, I was going to football, actually. And I said, why is that, Jane? And she said, and I'll never forget it, the classic words, have you got time to cut my boyfriend's hair? Now, I know who the boyfriend is. And I'm saying to myself, have I got time to cut the boyfriend's hair? Bloody sure I have, right? I definitely won't cut his hair. And I said, yeah, of course. When would you like me to come? She said, what suits you? So I did actually push my luck. I went to the football game and I said 5:30. And I thought, I wanted to go and see the game, but I pushed my luck. Because she said, actually, I thought in the next hour I would have done it. And she said, that's fine. So I went to my football match. I didn't tell anybody again. And I'm thinking, when the game's over, I'm going to go over to McCartney. But before that happened, I said, oh, Jane, by the way, where do you live? And she wrote down a bit of paper and said, 7 Cavendish Avenue. And I said, Jane, that's my surname. And she said, well, maybe it was meant. That was weird. Just to follow that up, I'll tell you what even more weird was that. When I got to do John Lennon's hair, the PR guy, Derek Taylor, who was like the 5th Beatle, I said, Leslie, Lennon wants you to go down to his house. Now, Paul lived in London, in St John's Wood, which is not that far from town. The other 3 Beatles lived down in Sunningdale, down in Weybridge. Well, they had this big country mansion, blah, 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 whatever. And this occasion, and she said, yeah, John wants you to cut his hair, possibly next week. And I said, okay, where does he live? And he says, he lives down in Weybridge, in Cavendish Close. How weird's that? So I had two cabbages, one there, one there. So that was it.
Wow.
So anyway, I ended up going from a football match over to McCartney's house. And that's when I started thinking, what am I doing? And that's when it all started happening. That was my first September 1966. There you go.
Wow. And your life changed forever.
Well, it did, because lots happened in September 66. Paul McCartney was supposed to be dead. You know, the big conspiracy thing. Paul McCartney is dead. Billy Shears took over. I had to do a lot there because in around that time, I was asked many times in interviews, how do you know it's the real Paul McCartney? When doing hairdressing, everybody knows that with her hair, if you push it back, you know, you have a little piece, there's a break somewhere. And that's how you can identify somebody, you know, you can't fake it. And I remember doing McCartney's hair, and there's this big conspiracy thing. McCartney's dead, and the people are saying he died in a car crash and they brought someone else in, like Jane Asher wouldn't know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. And Lennon wouldn't know, right? Oh, yeah. So a different guy writing the same songs, yeah? And I remember washing his hair at his house, and I used to do it in a basin. This is not a salon. I'm talking about a normal sink basin with some water like this going over his head, right? Seriously, this is Paul McCartney. He could afford anything. And I remember saying to him, it was in the news, and I said, Paul, I was thinking to myself, what happens if his hair doesn't fall in that right spot? What actually would happen? Maybe it's not him. So I had I remember his hair being completely wet, and I was pushing it back. And I thought, right, just give it a little push forward to see if it breaks. And it did break. He's watching all this, by the way. He's got no idea what I'm doing. Because we're having a conversation, but he doesn't know how my head is thinking about that. It did fall into that place. I said, Paul, I've got something to tell you. He said, what is it? I said, you're not dead. I needed somebody to confirm that. Thanks, Leslie. So little things like that, you know. And what the great thing is, you know, when I actually went into the front door of his house, which was another weird thing, because the housekeeper, when I pressed the buzzer, said, oh, yes, Miss Asher told me that you were coming this afternoon. That's fine. And I walked through. The first thing I saw was an green Aston Martin on the left-hand side. And I thought, oh, my God, you know, James Bond and McCartney. I mean, this is when you make it big time.
Yeah.
And when I got to the front door, I sort of, you know, my sister's got pictures of Paul McCartney in her front room, right? So, you know, and I happen to be a Beatles fan as well. So not as if I'm going to somewhere that I'm not really interested in. And I pressed the bell. I thought, all right, just take a deep breath. Housekeeper's going to come in, and you'll just get yourself together, and da-da-da-da-da. And as I pressed the bell, the door opened, it was Paul McCartney. Caught me right off. And he said, hello, Leslie, James told me all about you. Would you like to come in? Would you like some tea? So within that moment of parking my car outside, I'm having tea with Paul McCartney in his front room. I've got Hoffner basses and a psychedelic piano. I've got a mad dog called Martha jumping all over the place. And it's a bit surreal, really. I'm sitting there. Then eventually I have to say to him, you know, by the way, Paul, how do you want your hair? Now, my timing, you couldn't get better timing for me to cut McCartney's hair, because I told you it was September 1966. And the last concert the Beatles ever did was at Candlestick Park in San Francisco in August the 27th, 28th, the end of August anyway. So we're talking about 3 weeks later that he is not a Beatle, he's Paul McCartney. Although he's a Beatle, he's not really Paul McCartney. So when I saw him, he was unshaven, he had a little bit of a moustache, unshaven like you do. He didn't have to, because the Beatles for the last 4 or 5 years were dressed in Chelsea boots and suits and white and ties and things. And now, all their hair always looked immaculate because they had people from the TV studios there. So when I saw him, his hair was not quite as neat as the rest of that you saw the Beatles as they were on stage. So I said to him, how would you want your hair? And he said, the greatest thing, which is great, and it happened to all 3 other Beatles, do it as you see it. Well, what a nice thing to say. Do it as you see it. You know, I've got my hair in a very similar situation to him. I've got long hair, and I'm going to do it the way I see it. And he didn't mind. So that's how it actually worked. And it was a very nice, there was no one around, no managers or stylists saying to me, right, we want it like this, and you've only got half an hour to do it. It was great. It was a great intro to it. Had it been at a salon, it would never have been the same. So I would have been talking to him in a mirror, and it would have been, thank you very much. Back mirror, thank you very much. So yeah, that was my first intro to Paul McCartney.
Do you have maybe one story that you could share with us, kind of that little back behind the scenes things, silly things that go on that maybe
I could tell you a couple of stories.
Not aware of?
I tell you 4,500 stories.
I was hoping.
No, I'll tell you a couple of stories that interested me. I made my mind up that I never was going to ask the Beatles for an autograph. I was never going to take a lock of their hair, okay? Because as I do say, I didn't want to be a one-cut wonder. I wanted to cut an album. I quite like that.
Yeah.
But what I did want to do was to go and watch and record or rehearse. So, he did that. He allowed me to, I used to go to Abbey Road, which actually was called EMI Studios before Abbey Road even came out. So I used to go there, and I used to, I don't know if you've ever been to Abbey Road, but Abbey Road's got two studios, a big enormous studio, which is Studio 2, which would take an orchestra. Then you have Studio 1, which is the smaller one where the Beatles used to record. So when I went to Abbey Road, or EMI, I keep saying Abbey Road, it's actually EMI, the road manager, a guy called Mal Evans, said, why did you go in Studio 2? And I went, oh, okay. And I was there was George Martin, the producer, there was Jeff Emmerich, the engineer, and I sat in the corner. And I looked over, and there was this big orchestra. And there was McCartney conducting it and saying, no, to the violins, you do this, do that. No idea what he was doing. And when eventually their new album came out, it happened to be Sgt. Pepper, I was watching the rehearsing of A Day in the Life, which was quite amazing, which was nice. And the other one was, I couldn't talk to Paul McCartney or any of the other Beatles about football because for some mad reason, they weren't that into it. And Liverpool Football Club at the time were the European champions. They won everything. I mean, it was a very proud time to be a Liverpudlian. You had the football team, you had the Beatles. You couldn't have got better than that, okay?
Yeah.
They didn't really talk about it. So what do you talk about when you're sitting there with someone after a while? Have you written anything lately? Then he went, yeah, what do you think of this? And he sat down at the piano. This was all after I finished his hair, by the way. And just sort of plonked on the piano, went, ooh-blah-dee, ooh-blah-da, la, 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 life goes on. And I thought that was him just mucking about on the piano keys because it didn't sound like a song. Again, when it came out, suddenly, ooh-blah-dee, ooh-blah-da, life goes on, boy.
Yeah.
I suddenly went, oh, my God, you played that to me before you recorded. So there were all these little perks for me. They were good little stories there.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a memory to be able to say that you did the Beatles hair, you did Paul McCartney's hair. And you also wrote a book called The Cutting Edge. Can you explain to the viewers what that's about?
Yeah. So again, I learned to keep my mouth shut. Mm-hmm. That's what Sassoon always said. I never told anybody that I cut the Beatles hair. I went to football with my mates that day and never told them, guess what I'm doing? I'm going around to cut Paul. Just keep quiet. You never know. Mm-hmm. Never know when it could all be over, Mm-hmm. So I don't want to let it be over naturally rather than me being fired. Over the years, the press used to ring me up because they knew I became Paul McCartney's hairdresser after a while. It was told in the press, and I sort of said, yes, I remember that, or the anniversary of an album, or when Lennon got killed. And I got all these stories that I remembered. When I was at Apple, which was the Apple offices, that was like my second hairdressing studio, because the Beatles opened up a hairdressing salon for me in the King's Road, Chelsea. But their main offices were in Savile Row. So I used to go backwards and forwards, always cutting new artists' hair and whatever. I went up there one time, as I said before, Derek Taylor, the press officer, I remember going in there one afternoon and there was sacks full. It was like being in Father Christmas's front room. There were sacks of piled up near enough to the ceiling. And I said, Derek, what is that? And he said, they're all the press cuttings from the Beatles. We get them from all over the world. I said, that's quite amazing. He said, yes, there's, believe it or not, there's... I said, how do you do that? He said, there's a company called Associated Press, right? That we paid a fee, and every time your name's out there, they get all the press cuttings. And I just said, oh, that's great. Can I go on that? And he said, yeah. And he put my name down. Next thing I know, I'm getting all these press cuttings all around the world wherever my name was mentioned. So I made a scrapbook of it. move it all on. When I got to, I was living, I lived half my life in Spain and half my life here in London, that is. And I was just suddenly thinking, after a while, that all these people are asking questions. The Beatles are coming back in. The two Beatles have died. McCartney is on tour. I've got all these nice stories. I started writing them down, and I started checking with my press cutting book, as if people say, if you remember the 60s, then there's something wrong. But I did everything wrong, and I still remember the 60s. So I started looking at the press cutting. I remember going to EMI studios. I remember this. I remember that. So I started doing sort of writing it down, and it became like my Beatles book. And then I realised that's not really what I want to do, because there's much more to it. There's the culture factor of going to Sassoon's, seeing the revolution in hair, seeing the revolution of people. I was at Sassoon's, there were guys there. I was at Sassoon's 1962, I started there. And I didn't know. I mean, Tony will tell you this. I used to see Tony at a club in London. And yes, girls, girlfriends and guys used to sit in the changing room and say, did you have a nice weekend? And you'd say, oh, yeah, I met this lovely girl, whatever. And we would say that. I know 3 of the guys, even to this day, were gay, but they couldn't tell us. That must have been terrible for them. So during the course of the book, when 1967, it became legal, then you had the Vietnam War, and then you had all what was going on, this whole culture thing, especially in England as well. I developed the story, and that's how the cutting edge came about. And it just so happens, funny enough, believe it or not, it's all in there for us.
And I just ordered that book through Amazon, and of course it hasn't come in, so I'm anxious to read it.
Yeah,
it is just
So I decided that all these stories, I'm 77 now, and I wrote the book in 2017, so 5 years ago, whatever. I gave it long enough. I kept quiet long enough, and there's nothing shocking in it. There's nothing sort of, oh my God. I remember when I used to come out of McCartney's house, they used to offer me money, the Sunday newspapers. Can you tell us a little story? And I had to say, what type of, and I say no. And they said, go on, tell us something. I said, the Beatles take drugs. Well, we know that. I said, well, what do you want me to tell you? Tell us something a bit more. No, thank you. No, thank you. The biggest prize, the biggest amount of money that I could have made was when I actually cut Paul McCartney's hair that short. I actually gave him a skinhead haircut, a Finch. And that came about when I was doing his hair, and I happened to say to him, I haven't seen Jane for a while. And he said, no, she's filming. She was actually filming with Michael Caine, a film. And I think it was Alfie. And I said, what a shame. I said, well, now you're not touring anymore. Maybe you'll go down to the studio and see her. Meanwhile, I'm still doing his hair, right? And he said, no, I can't do that because we just stopped touring. The whole thing about the Beatles is not fair and Jane. So I said, okay, fine. I carried on. I said, so when she finishes the film, you'll go on holiday, I take it. He said, we'd love to, but the press will be everywhere, so that's not possible. And as I'm holding his hair, I sort of said to him, what a shame. I said, why didn't you go in disguise? And he said, like how? Well, I didn't know like how. I didn't quite know what I was saying. I didn't say put on a clown's outfit. And as the hair was in my hand, I just said, why don't I cut all your hair off? Now, he had hair down to here, well, not there, he had long hair. He had Beatles hair, right? And he just looked at me in the mirror. I said, go on then, do it. I said, what? Just do it. He said, yep. So I started cutting hair from the back, so you don't go right from the front. I started until I eventually he saw his ears, and then he didn't flinch at all and cut it that short. I thought to myself, my God, you've blown it. Now you have blown it, because what happens if Brian Epstein gets a phone call from an American promoter, because don't forget the Beatles had just stopped touring, that they said, we'll give you $1 billion for the Beatles to do an appearance. And I'm thinking, oh my God, and Paul McCartney's got hair that short, that'd be, blah, blah. Anyway, I didn't hear anything for about 6 weeks. And in the newspapers, big article, Paul McCartney comes back from safari holiday from Kenya, left at Nairobi Airport to get into Heathrow, London. Actually, it was called London Airport at the time. And when they get there, with his girlfriend, now fiancée Jane Asher, and his road manager, Mal Evans. So when they get to the other end, someone shouted out on the press, Paul, my God, we didn't recognise you. What happened? And his Mal Evans turned around and said, oh, his barber, Leslie Cavendish, did it. Thank you, Mal. So, can you imagine? I could have gone to the press and said to them, never guess what I did. I just cut all McCartney's hair off. Mm-hmm. So there's loads of little stories like that that make me laugh and actually happened. I've got the press cuttings to prove it, just in case in my own head I thought, did that really happen? Yeah, I've got loads of press cuttings.
Remember, you heard it here first. Icons and entrepreneurs. Leslie Cavendish, the inner circle of the Beatles family. Wow. Mm-hmm. Pretty special.
So was that one of the photographs you sent to us?
Yes.
Paul McCartney, you cut his hair very short. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had another one. Interesting. It's funny. Lots of things happen with hair with me, with the Beatles. So I'm sort of I thought I was a streetwise kid, right? I'm 21 years old. I've got my own salon in the King's Road with the Beatles financed. I'm doing every rock star there is up the Billboard and, all these people, The Who, and James Taylor. And there's people coming into my life there. It's really fun and going to nice parties. And this girl, this journalist, I still remember her name, Caroline Boucher. And we had 2 magazines, big music magazines, NME, New Music Express, and Disc and Echo. And she was the chief writer for Disc and Echo. Great big publication. She said, Leslie, can I ask you about the texture? We went out and had a coffee. Can I ask you about the texture of the Beatles' hair? So I said, yeah, no problem. I'm sitting there all cool and everything, Mr. Coolness. What's Paul McCartney's hair like? Oh, great, really lovely thick hair. I can manoeuvre it around. And George Harrison's terrific. He's got longer hair, and that is fabulous hair to talk. And Ringo, I said, well, Ringo's hair is great. I said, I don't actually do a lot of his hair because his wife, Maureen, is a hairdresser. Okay? But I did do it on occasion. I did it for a couple of films he did and whatever. Anyway. And then I said, yeah, but his hair's superb, And John Lennon's, I said, it's okay. Well, there was a mistake that Mr. Cool didn't even know what he said. And I said, yes. So she picked up on it and said, well, what do you mean it's okay? And I went, well, his hair's okay. She says, it's not superb, it's not great. So are you telling me he's got the thinnest of the hair, or not the thickest of the hair? And I said, well, yeah, I suppose so. She said, oh, okay. She's very cool, this girl. And she said, so let's just move it on about 20, 30 years. Do you think he would be the first Beatle to lose all his hair and go bald? And I said, well, no. I said, don't be so silly. She said, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? That if he hasn't got the hair of the other 3, and he's got the thinnest hair, and you did say it was okay, didn't you? Oh, yeah, I did say it was okay. Then that could possibly happen. And I said, well, it could possibly happen, but it's not going to happen. And I left it at that. We had a lovely coffee, a little chat, blah, 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 blah. And I thank you for the interviews. Thank you very much. See you soon, Leslie. I go back not thinking a thing. I get a phone call from this guy, Derek Taylor again, who has helped me all through my Beatle career. Because, if you wanted an interview with the Beatles, you couldn't do it without Derek Taylor. he was the man. He really was a fifth, sixth Beatle. He rings me up in the evening. I don't normally get a phone call from Derek Taylor in the evening. Leslie, what have you said? Said what, Derek? It's in the newspapers and in the radio adverts that John Lennon's going bald. I said, don't be so stupid. He said, you better sort it out. So I couldn't sleep that night. I went to the newsagents the following morning, really went early, and I lived just off the King's Road. Okay, so my salon was at number 161 King's Road, and I lived in Chelsea Manor Street, which is literally 2 seconds away from where the shop is. And there was a newsagent I used to go to. I said, can I have the disc and echo, please? He said, yes, Leslie. She gave it to me. And there it was, front page on the top. Beatles hairdresser Leslie Cavendish says John Lennon's going bald.
Huh?
Oh, my God. I open up the centre page, and there's this great big full page, John Lennon is going bald, with my name in it.
Mm.
Right, so what's, if anyone's, can you imagine telling someone, if I thought his hair was going bald, Lennon must have thought, why didn't he tell me first? Okay? I go to the salon. I know I'm going to get a phone call from John Lennon. The phone rings. I can tell his voice. I'm hopeless at doing a Lennon Liverpool accent. I went, hello. And he went, oh, Leslie. So I went, yeah. And then I went into John. I said, I'm sorry. I never said that you were going bald. She totally took me out of context there. And I'm just blubbering. It sounded like I was going on and on. Must have been for about 20 seconds. And he actually said, just shut the F up. I thought, here we go. He said, don't talk to me about being taken out of context. Look what the effing hell happened to me. I said that we attract more people than Jesus Christ at our concerts they do in church. And then he said, so don't worry about it, about being taken out of context. I went, oh my God, that's unbelievable. Those tours in America where they said the Beatles are bigger than Jesus Christ was mega, really mega. And so I suddenly thought, oh my God, his whole attitude's changed. He totally understood. So I went, oh, okay, John, thank you. He said to me, mind you, he said, I need to know something. And I went, oh, what's that, John? He said, am I really going effing bald? I said, no, you better come over and sort me out. So I had to come over. And it was a funny story, but he could have literally gone the other way, but he didn't. So there's the humour of a lot. When people talk about Lennon, he was a difficult character at times. When they used to go into the offices in Savile Row, you get Ringo going in, hi everybody, the two receptionists would, hi man, peace and love, and McCartney was going, that when George would just float in, and then when Lennon came in, it was like the schoolmaster came in. You sort of sit back in your chair because you didn't know what mood he was in, and that's what he was like. So he was, I could only say good things about him because the times I met him and the times I've dealt with him, he was great. So that was another. So that was a bald story. That was someone going bald and someone being a skinhead. There you go.
Oh my God.
Well, you must have also done a lot of other celebrities because of your connection with the Beatles.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, my book is dedicated to my rock and roll spaniel called Ernie. And Ernie, I used to take him everywhere. And I did someone's hair. I did the chauffeur of the Bee Gees, or Barry Gibbs, right? And he said, Barry only lives up the road, right? So he lived in Eaton Square, which was at the top of the King's Road. And he said, we'd like you to cut his hair. So I went round to Barry Gibbs' house, with my dog. And because I did say to the guy, can I bring my dog with me? He said, yeah, Barry'd love it. He's got a dog. So when I go in there, he's got a dog called Barnaby. This great, big, beautiful Pyrenean mountain dog. If anyone's a Bee Gees fan, there's a great Bee Gees song called The 1st of May. And the 1st of May is Barnaby's birthday. So you got Barnaby's birthday and you got Martha, My Dear, which is Paul McCartney's old English dog. So my dog actually was the biggest groupie in rock and roll. I think he was. So I got to do the Bee Gees, Barry Gibbs' hair. I used to go around a lot in the evenings, not doing his hair. He used to play guitar. This was before he was married, by the way. I'd go around there one day. There was a guy called Richie Havens who opened up Woodstock. I met Richie Havens at the Apple offices, and I'd be sitting there like a groupie, sitting there in the room. Then they're playing acoustic guitars. Robin Gibb, I used to do his hair a lot. The only one I didn't do was Morris, and he happened to be married to Lulu at the time. I found him a bit aggressive, must be honest, so I didn't get on too well with him. But then I realised he was an alcoholic, and he had his own problems, so I forgive him on that one. Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, people like that. And the one I'm most proud of is really for my mum, because where my sister had Paul McCartney's hair, if my mum could have her wall decorated, she would have Tony Curtis. And that was who my mum, she thought he was it.
Yeah.
And I get a phone call in 1968, the Boston Strangler he did. And he was staying in London. And I get a phone call from his manager saying, could you please come over to the Dorchester Hotel, which is the #1 hotel, and he would like you to do his hair. And I can remember going there thinking, oh my God, my mother found this. Forget the Beatles. This is Curtis. And I go there and I said, I've come to see Mr. Curtis. He said, yes, he's in the penthouse suite. And I never forget it. It was, this was, I was more excited seeing him, Beatles, all before Beatles. And I go up to this incredible penthouse there. And I've got to admit that the place was stinking of dope up there. It was just, the smell of dope up there, which was nice, actually. And he was, did his hair, met him. And I said, look, it's quite amazing. I was telling him about my mum. I said, my mum, he said, yeah, but you tell me about the Beatles. I know more about you. Yeah. And I said, it's not often. I said, you've actually even had a haircut named after you, which is the DA. Do you know what the DA is? No? DA was with Tony Beckerman. If you're listening, you'll understand.
Oh, yeah.
You push your hair coming back,
yes.
do it in the middle, and it's called a DA, which translates into a duck's bottom. But I was being polite then. And so Tony Curtis with a quiff and the good looks, that was exciting. That was a very exciting. So yeah, I met all little people like that I sort of went, wow, interesting. I missed out on one person that I always wanted to. I cut the Beatles' hair and I cut Tony Curtis's hair. I'd love to have cut Jesus Christ's hair.
That's before your time.
Be known as Jesus Christ's hairdresser is just right. That would be very cool.
So Leslie, if you were to make a movie of your life, who should they cast to play your part?
Oh, who should they cast? Well, I don't know. Only going back, I go back to those days. I got no idea. But you know what? Remember the film Shampoo with Warren? Okay. I need a Warren Beatty type of market, an upmarket guy. So you tell me, or anybody out there, tell me who's the Warren Beatties today. Brad Pitt, yeah, but you've got to play me in two different parts. You've got to play me as a fifth. Mind you, he did Benjamin Button, so maybe he can do. Yeah, maybe he can do that. Yeah, I need two people. I'm greedy. A young guy and move on, but I'm sure there's someone out there.
Cool. Oh my God, your life is unbelievable.
It was exciting. You say that you don't get. What I liked about it was that you didn't. Especially being in a lot of these guys' environment, going to the clubs or whatever. There wasn't many people that were, I am, don't you know who I am? I never had any of that with any of the clients. I even trying to think now, maybe because they were all stoned out their head, like they were all sort of
that was going on in the 60s.
That's what it was all about. I was in the same situation, so there was no sort of heavy, that I am me. Can you imagine today? Today you've got an entourage. You wouldn't be able to get near these people, right? But those days, go to Apple. You had two receptionists there. You had one guy downstairs. Nothing. There was none of this. They had road managers they brought down from Liverpool, two guys. It's quite amazing. Unfortunately, it all sounds amazing until something happens like John Lennon.
Yeah.
You know, walks out and a classic fan that ruins it for everybody. So sad, but yeah, it's. But you know, at the time, it was nice. You know, it's. I had a really good girlfriend at the time that worked. Who was George Harrison's PA, and she was she became a very quite an important person at the Apple organisation. So, which was good because if I had to go anywhere, she would come. We would go out together because she knew the Beatles. She wouldn't be saying, "Oh my God, you know, that's Paul McCartney," and vice versa. If she was invited anywhere, I would go along with her. So it was all easy because we both, you know, both of us never sold out. We didn't, you know, we didn't tell in the press. We weren't sneaking. You know, it was called trust. But like all down to Sassoon. You know, I knew nothing about all this nonsense about, you know, respect. Remember, they're the client, and that's what Sassoon did for me, and I'm sure he did it to hundreds of other people there, and they learned it. Otherwise, you'd lose your clientele. You'd do it. You would become a one-cut wonder. You know, you would keep respect. So getting back to what you said before, that I learned, I put it down. My education started at Sassoon's, and then moved on to Grosvenor House, you know, which was another exciting life. Going with Roger Thompson, who never did forgive me, by the way, of doing the Beatles' hair. So unfortunately, we had a bit of a fallout, and I did something that I've never done to anyone in my life. I actually whacked him in the face for him. For him, it's all in my book. I don't hide the fact. He got so jealous that I ended up doing McCartney and the other Beatles' hair through his being slow, not doing Jane Asher's hair, because he really is the Pete Best of hairdressing. Bless him. You know, he didn't. He could have been, but he didn't. And he kept needling me the whole time I was at Grosvenor House, the whole time. And I don't know if you remember, but we couldn't cut men's hair during working hours. Ladies and gentlemen could be sitting next to each other. That's what I told you. When Lawrence Falk started a unisex salon where a man and a woman could all be together in one salon. But I used to do it at 6 o'clock upstairs in the tinting room. So I used to cut people like Keith Moon up there and a couple of the other, you know, whoever came in. And he used to, because Roger worked so late, he used to see me come down, and when the client left, he started accusing me of lots of things. He was just being nasty, to be honest with you. And I got to know him really well. Trust me, I used to make a lot of excuses up for that man. And I still respect him to this day. He taught me everything. But he literally was that much away from my face and gave me a little shove. And I lost it. I went, boom! And he landed on the floor. And my biggest fear was that his brother-in-law was Joshua Galvin. He was the manager of Bond Street. And the receptionist called him up and said, "What happened?" Now, Joshua, I love him. He was built like a middleweight boxer, short guy, built like a boxer. And I thought, oh my God, he's just going to smash me up, this guy. Yeah, I see a taxi come rolling up down in the Grosvenor House entrance. Joshua comes running out there. Meanwhile, Roger has now been picked up, gone into a room as being, his eye just sort of came up. And Roger came bursting through. I thought, oh, here we go. Here we go. And he came over to me with his right hand and said, "Give me your hand." And I gave him my hand. He said, "If it wasn't you, I'm so glad you did what I wanted to do." That shows you. That is ridiculous. I'm telling you, that's the words he said to me. And I went, oh my God. I know why, but we'll leave that out. As I say, I live a lot in Spain. And before Joshua passed away, he was living not too far from me in a place called Alarin El Grande, which is where I had a home. And we arranged, he was in that place called Coin. And we arranged to have lunch together. And I recalled that story to him, which he knew. And I did say to him, I said, "Roger, Josh," I said, "I thought you were going to smack me right in the mouth there. You know, you did it for me. But, you know, there were internal family problems that were on. But, you know, I must say, to finish that off, that before Roger went to New York, I did when I left Sassoon's and worked and had my own salon going. I thought I'd go in and see him, and I said to the reception, "Could you tell Mr. Mr. Roger, that Leslie Cavendish is upstairs, and would he like to meet me for a drink in the Grosvenor House?" Expecting him to say no. So I waited. I said, "I'll be in the Grosvenor House." I waited there, and Roger came in, and we had a drink, and I thanked him everything what he did for me, and I wished him good luck in New York. So we did leave on good terms. So,
Yeah.
you know, good guy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And to be able to recognize that, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Anyway.
so can you tell people, our audience, where they can find you?
Yep, you can get me on my Facebook page, or you can get my book on www.beatlesbookstore.com. You can message me on Facebook. You can. I have my email, which is www.beatleshairdresser.com. I'll answer any questions you want. I'll do anything, and that's where it is. And you'll read. You say 5,000 stories. I think I've got 6,000 in there, by the way. So it's just really just a journey of a 50-year-old guy that didn't know what he was doing. To be honest with you, you end up cutting the four most famous heads of the world, and working with a magician called Vidal Sassoon. That couldn't be bad, can it?
Dude.
Awesome. I'm just wondering, because it seems to me like you were fulfilling your destiny. That there was fate, that's the path that you were on, and you took full advantage of it. And you're the type of person who made a lot of personal relationships out of something that could have been pure business. What a life you've had, Leslie.
Yeah, and they were good. I had a good education. Yeah, it was life education. It was nice, things don't last forever, but, if to look back, and it's only now, not so much now, but, over the years, then, you see the two Beatles, I remember having a bet if you had a bet with somebody, and I remember we talked about this, if you had a bet to say how many Rolling Stones would be alive, and how many Beatles would be alive, then they got drugged. If anyone else wants to read a great book, besides my great book, it's called My Life, Keith Richard. Just read that book and wonder how that man is still alive. Okay? So you look at it, and then you say to yourself, up to last year, before Charlie Watts died, they're all alive, the Rolling Stones, and you've only got two Beatles left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe, just Bob Dylan said, twist of fate. Who would have thought that? So it was an exciting time, and it was my youth. Because it happened from an early age, I was living my youth. I was growing up with it. I'm growing up with music that I loved.
Yeah,
we all love an older one. And looking back and going, oh yeah, they were good. So yeah, it was as you say, just happened.
I would say two of the biggest influences in my life were Vidal Sassoon and the music that was coming out of England at that time. It was a phenomenal time to be in the age that could appreciate that. That's wonderful. Do you have any particular mottos, credos, mantras, anything like that sort of helped guide you through all the journey you've been on?
I'd like to say yes. I'm going to be honest with you. I just was myself.
Yeah.
I just was myself. I couldn't hide it. I mean, I'm telling jokes and bad jokes and whatever. I like laughter in my life.
Yes. Laughter
to me is sort of, I got turned on. I got turned on to a different type of humour that I still love. Lenny Bruce. A friend of mine turned me on to Lenny Bruce. He put me through earphones of Lenny Bruce live at Berkeley. Oh my God! And I just got so the humour of life and looking at life in different ways, was interesting. I was lucky. Then I think the thing about it was I met people who turned me on to music, actually, and humour,
Yep.
And just, but if I stayed up in North London,
Yeah.
I come from a Jewish family there, not religious, and you would have, all those guys wanted to do was flash cars, gamble, and they got married,
Yeah.
and that's what that was for me, so, they went one path and I went my other path, and it's just the way that the paths go in life, you can easily just sort of check it out, or you don't. So who knows? Who knows?
Well,
Well, on that note, we're going to laugh a lot, right?
But we are going to laugh, and thank you so much indeed, Lulu and Sue. You've been terrific.
And we want to thank you artists, icons, and entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for being our guests and
Thank
sharing
you.
your journey with us. We love hearing all those stories. And Sue and I have learned so much from all our guests, and especially you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. You take care.
you as well, Leslie. You're a beautiful person. And I think your story is just inspiring for all of us to be positive, learn to laugh at ourselves, and follow our faith. And that's
You're absolutely right. Let's
living
keep
your
doing it.
destiny every day.
Okay.
Wow, what an episode. That wraps up another exciting edition of Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you're leaving inspired and ready to chase your dreams. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode over at youtube.com/artists, icons, entrepreneurs, as well as Facebook at Lulu Benavidez, on IG at Lulu Benavidez, at Evolve Hair Solutions as well. And don't forget to visit our website at lulubenavidez.com and evolvehairsolutions.com to stay updated. Until next time, keep dreaming big, creating boldly, and making your mark on the world. Thanks for listening, and take care, everyone.